This took place 4 years ago when I was 17. We had just adopted a dog and was meant to be a family dog, but I knew from the second that we got her, she was mine. We were inseparable. My family goes on vacation to Virginia Beach every summer for a week. That year, I stayed behind with Lassie. She doesn't do well with strangers. She's a rescue and still has some lingering anxiety, so leaving her behind with the neighbors or putting her in a kennel wasn't really an option. I didn't mind, honestly. The idea of a quiet house all to myself for a week sounded kind of perfect. The first couple of nights were pretty uneventful. I spent most of the time catching up on shows, reading, and just enjoying the silence. No noise, no small talk, just me and Lassie. But on the third night, that's when it started to get weird. Like always, I locked up the house, shut and locked my bedroom door, and made sure Lassie was with me. I drifted off to sleep without any problems. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of our Alexa in the kitchen saying, "Sorry, I can't understand that." Then maybe a second later, classical piano music started playing. Lassie immediately jumped off the bed, ran to the door, and started growling. Not barking, just that low, tense growl she does when something feels off. I sat up, completely still. My first thought was that someone had broken in, but I couldn't hear anything else. No footsteps, no movement, just the piano, calmly playing through the silence. I stayed up for the rest of the night, wide awake, just listening. As soon as it was light out, I got up and cautiously opened my bedroom door and checked every nook and cranny. I even checked the outside of the house, but there was no sign of forced entry. I went back inside and unplugged the Alexa and shoved it in the drawer. I tried to convince myself that it was just a fluke. Maybe it picked up a weird sound or got triggered by something random, but the next night, around the same time, it happened again. "Sorry, I can't understand that," followed by the same soft piano music, the exact same song, which meant Lassie stood by the door again, growling just like before. I didn't sleep much the rest of the time my family was away. I was so relieved when they came back. My mom asked me, "So, how was it when we were gone?" I said fine, but later in private, I told her my experience. She turned a pale white and said, "You too?" Apparently, our house was previously owned by a husband and wife, and sadly, the wife died in the house. I was really young when we moved in, so I didn't remember it, but when we moved in, our house was completely empty, except for a piano. My parents called the previous owner about this, and he said that he didn't want it. It brought back too many memories. We decided to keep it, and we just never really got rid of it. Apparently, his wife loved playing the piano. She would play it every night, and I'm sure that was her playing it to keep me company while they were gone on vacation. Right after I graduated from college, I moved into an apartment that I swear was haunted, but it had no business being so. It was a mid-rise building, built in the 1970s in a North American city, and I had dated a guy who lived there for a couple years before moving in and never noticed anything weird in his apartment, but strange things would happen in mine fairly often. The unit itself was a little weird. It was on the ground floor and very small. It was listed as a junior one-bedroom, but it had clearly been a studio apartment that was weirdly partitioned into a one-bedroom. I mean like a crooked wall between the main living space and the bedroom. It was sturdy enough, but it was only about an inch wide and clearly added in after the original space had been built, as evidenced by the heater under the window running straight through this wall, along with a gap big enough to pass wires and cables between rooms. I always figured that the entire apartment had previously been part of the landlord's big suite, since they lived right next door. If I recall correctly, there were actually some wires coming through the wall, but no actual gaps. The unit was kind of shaped like a U, where you'd walk in from the building hallway, straight into the kitchen/living room, turn right into the bedroom, and then right again into the bathroom. Mostly, it was the classic things where they shouldn't be and shouldn't be moving by themselves shtick. One morning, I was brushing my teeth and noticed that the cup that I put my toothpaste and toothbrush in was very casually moving its way all around the countertop around the sink. For whatever reason, I didn't freak out. I just watched as it slid around. I assumed there was water under the cup causing it to shift, but when I picked it up, it was dry as a bone. It wasn't until hours later, when I was at work, I realized that was weird. Another time, I had just finished a big deep clean of the entire apartment and got out of the shower ready to relax, but I couldn't find my glasses. It was a tiny place, and I had just cleaned. but I spent a good 10 minutes squinting, looking around all the usual spots, and then checking the garbage and the cupboards, etc., in case I had just been an idiot. Then I walked back into the bedroom, and there they were, sitting neatly on my bed, placed to perfectly face me as I walked in. This time I realized this is messed up, but I kind of just shook my head, put on the glasses, and went on about my night. So things like that would continue to happen, and I just kind of learned to shake them off. It seemed like if there was a paranormal visitor, it was just a bit of a joker, and as long as things weren't malicious, it didn't really bother me. But what did freak me out was the scratching noises in the bathroom. As I said earlier, the bathroom was connected to the bedroom, and being a recent college student on my own for the first time, I was using a futon as a bed, which meant I was very low to the floor, the perfect height to hear what sounded like something trying to get up from inside the bathtub. Not like the part you sit in, but scratching from the hollow space in the tub mold. I tried to convince myself that it was just a mouse, but the scratching was slow and sounded so big, really like someone dragging a nail or nails along the side of the bathtub, rather than the quick little scritching that the shuffling mice make. I grew up on a farm. I was no stranger to mice in the walls, and this didn't sound like that at all. I was almost able to convince myself that it was just a mouse, and I was just being a scaredy cat, except I did have a cat, and she reacted to this noise every time like it was something terrifying. I adopted a feisty little kitten right after moving in, and she wanted nothing to do with those noises. She refused to leave my side to get further from the scratching. She loved people, even strangers. She would hunt any insect she spotted. She's even caught some mice in her later life, but when this sound would start up, she would nestle as close to me as she possibly could and stare into the bathroom at full attention. I tried once or twice to nudge her into the bathroom to catch the mouse, and she gave me the clearest "Are you fucking kidding me?" look I've ever seen from a cat, and would just press back closer into my chest. But yeah, that's basically the worst of it. I never did find out what that noise might be, and I don't want to. It was the middle of summer, and my parents left me home alone for the weekend to go to our other place in Cape Cod. It was about a 2-hour drive away, so it's not a big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made me some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up and eat whenever I got hungry, and I had some money if I wanted to order a pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up until 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. The first thing I did when I woke up was check my phone, and I saw it was a little past 1. I had made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone, I go mental. I was in there for about 45 minutes on my phone, just scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and whatnot. Then, I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the front door, and the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since, obviously, I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears trained in, trying to hear anything else, but there was nothing. I figured it was just the wind, maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. So, the stairs to the kitchen, where the back door is, are pretty tight and walled in, so it's essentially like walking down a tighter version of this, but replacing the rail with a wall, so I can't see the kitchen when I'm walking down. Even though my house is really old and each step of the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of the stairs, so when I get to the second to the last stair, right before I could see around the corner into the kitchen, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen. There's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them still to be in the kitchen, even if there were burglars or someone in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled to myself and just normally walked the last 2 stairs and turned the corner to the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of my kitchen is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face, just staring at me. The thing I remember the most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but it was his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I've ever seen. They were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up a little behind himself. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I almost had a heart attack right then and there. Looking back, I can realize how fucking creepy this situation was, but in the moment, I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping, half pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I sprinted into my room and locked the door behind me. I quickly put up a chair against the doorknob like you would see in TV. Almost without thinking about it, I immediately called 911. Nearly in tears, I told the operator what was happening. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door, praying that the cop would be there soon, I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. He was standing right outside my door. There's no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would just go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello? Sir? Sir? Are you there? Hello?" I didn't want to make any noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually, the light returned to the gap, and I heard the faintest of footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes, as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there. I almost cried. Nowadays, my parents don't even leave me home alone anymore, thank God, and I check every lock on the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally, and my heart starts racing whenever I see someone standing still, but I'm doing alright. Even working with sketch artists and doing a few lineups, the police never found whoever was in my house. That sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street, smiling under a lamppost. To this day, I have no idea what he wanted or who he was, but regardless, let's not meet ever again. This story takes place when I was 22 years old. I had just gotten home from a long night of stocking shelves at my local grocery store. I worked the closing shift, so I usually got home around midnight. I shared a cheap apartment with my roommate, Mark. We weren't in the best of neighborhoods, but I felt lucky to have a place to live that wasn't my parents' basement. I threw my jacket on the coat rack next to the front door and walked into the kitchen to rummage through the fridge for something to eat. I had just pulled a frozen burrito out of the freezer when I noticed something weird. My bedroom door had been slightly open when I walked by the hallway. I know this doesn't sound strange at first, but I specifically remembered closing it that morning when I left for work. I like my privacy, so I always remember to shut my door when I leave for the day. I stepped back into the living room looking down the hall. "Hello?" I called. There was just dead silence. Not wanting to let the fear get the better of me, I walked across the living room and flicked on the hallway light switch. "Mark, is that you?" I asked. Mark had always been a bit of an odd guy, so I couldn't help but think that maybe he was just trying to play some sort of weird prank on me, maybe waiting to jump out of my closet or something when I entered the room. When I finally got to my bedroom door, I gently pushed it open. The light from the hallway illuminated a large portion of the room. I looked around, definitely feeling creepy vibes. There was no one there, and nothing looked out of the ordinary. Just the usual, my twin bed with a nightstand to the left. I closed the door and walked back to the kitchen. I popped my dinner into the microwave and pressed the start button. While that was cooking, I turned on the television, ready to put on a scary movie to try and relax. Suddenly, I heard a muffled thump coming from down the hall. At first, I thought it was the neighbors or something. They can be pretty loud sometimes, and it's not unusual to hear a loud bump in the night. But then, it happened again, and this time I could tell for sure that it was in my apartment coming from just down the hall. "Mark," I called once more. The microwave beeped just then, and I nearly had a heart attack. "Yeah, sorry, dropped something," I could hear him say through the door. I'll admit, I felt a little better knowing that Mark was home. I walked back into the kitchen to get my food, and that's when my phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text message from Mark. "Hey dude, running a little late here at work. Could you please leave the door unlocked for me?" My stomach dropped to the floor and a chill ran down my spine. I texted back, "Wait, you're still at work?" He responded only a few seconds later, "Yeah? Why?" At that moment, there was another noise from the hall, and I looked up. The silhouette of a large man was standing there, holding what appeared to be a butcher's knife. I turned and ran towards the front door, hearing the heavy clunk of the man's boots behind me. He wasn't running. Instead, it just sounded like he was slowly walking, taking his time. I didn't stop to look back. I ran down the emergency staircase and out into the parking lot, where I called the cops. The cops showed up just a few minutes later. They went upstairs and searched my apartment, but they said they didn't find anyone. What they did find still terrifies me to this day. As they were searching in the apartment, the cops found a note left on the kitchen table, held under the salt shaker. On that note, only one word was written: soon.